There you go.
Is it?
Okay, that's it, 'cause
Okay.
it came up here.
Okay, we're now being recorded, and now I have to go back and find out how to bring my thing back up.
Do you folks need agendas, copies of the agenda?
Oh, that'd be wonderful, but, yeah, that'd be great.
You know, I want to.
Thank you very much.
That's what I want to, okay. Okay, I think we're all set. We only have one
Part of the meeting.
participant. Okay,
Okay.
so it is
Oh, I
now,
copy- I copy it.
So thank you.
Yeah,
me too.
Thank you. Oh, they're passing this, that's terrific, thank you.
yeah, on that side, so we're ambidextrous.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so I'll start over again at 7:34.
You're not allowed to do.
At 7:34, we have present, a quorum. Chuck said he'd come in for the first beginning of the meeting, but, I don't see him. So we have present, Sylvia Alexander, Steve Fruit, and myself, Martin Wolpoff. We also have two guests. One is Sage Hamilton, please,
Hazarika
Azarica,
and
Laura Chenven, CHENVEN, ENVEN.
Great, okay,
And also a resident of Community Court.
as you pointed out before, yes.
Correct.
All right, so here is our agenda. First item is approval of the minutes. We also have online, Julie Reyes, Community Chair of Community Board 8. Any comments on the minutes? Other than to thank Steve for, quitting his day job to do the minutes.
If you only knew.
So, is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a vote? All in favor? Okay, unanimous. On minutes. Second item, I'm gonna skip chairperson's report and go right to item 4. Request to support proposed Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad byway. As I have written to you, the calendar somehow, based upon the request, which they will explain. What was that, Sage?
oh yes, I'm requesting to be able to share a screen. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, so I have to stop sharing. And we have to. A request of community board for us to support a resolution on the proposed Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad, New York Heritage Corridor. Apparently, this needs to be on the agenda tomorrow and cannot be unless it's vetted through a committee. And chronologically, we lucked out. So
Yes,
not only do we get to present this resolution, we also get to learn more about Harriet Tubman. That being said, I will turn the floor over to Sage.
Well, I'd like to reiterate my earlier thanks of accommodating us within this shortened timeline. We'll be able to speak about some of the reasons of why we're expediting our process. But my name is Sage Hamilton Hazarika. I am the corridor coordinator for the Underground Railroad Consortium of New York State, a statewide 501c3 kind of partnership association of groups, initiatives, researchers, museums that all have to do with Underground Railroad history. One of which is represented by my colleague, who I will let introduce herself.
Sure. So I'm Laura Chenven, and I work with the Mid-Hudson Anti-Slavery History Project. We do work to do research on the history of slavery, anti-slavery and abolition in the Hudson Valley. And by that, we generally mean from here north to close to Albany. We have been, over the last few years, there's been a real wealth of information coming out about the role that enslaved people had in actually building the economy, the infrastructure and the culture of early New York, which has been very exciting and interesting. And also at the same time, learning about a real movement of anti-slavery that also existed in the Hudson Valley that was part of the Underground Railroad, moving people north along the river in particular, and also several other places in the state. But the river was one of the big pathways actually for the Underground Railroad. And indeed, and that includes Harriet Tubman, but also many other Black and white abolitionists who were involved. And we know that Harriet Tubman actually came up on the train with people who she was freeing from the South on this train that was moving from New York City up to Albany, where she dropped off what we now like to call freedom seekers with Stephen Myers, who was a ship captain and a major agent on the Underground Railroad who lived in Albany. There's a wonderful, you grew up in Albany, the Stephen and Harriet Myers homestead is there. It's a terrific place to learn more about that history. But he was in touch with Harriet Tubman, as were a number of other people who were in locations on this string going up the Hudson River, over to Albany, and then across west over to Niagara. And so this byway that you're going to learn more about from Sage in a minute is a tremendous opportunity to teach history, but also from a local perspective to really expand on some of the hidden or just being exposed history that could bring more visitors to our area, could be a source for educational programming. And I know that there are a number of people within this community and within Community Board 8, including I've been in touch with Margaret over at the house, you know, the Van Cortlandt House, that has been doing a really wonderful job of expanding its interpretation to discuss both those who were owners of that house, but also the enslaved people who lived and worked there as well. So there's a tremendous opportunity here, and I think, you know, to learn more about what the whole picture is, but I can only begin to imagine how we can use this opportunity to build some really interesting interpretation sites, programming, for children and for adults, that could be very valuable to our community, and could bring also other visitors who will be traveling up this pathway to the businesses and locations that we have here now.
Thank you, Laura. So yeah, continuing off of that theme, I'd like to just talk really quickly about what a byway is. So a byway is a public road having special intrinsic qualities. In this case, we're thinking of history as being the intrinsic quality by which we connect a lot of different abolition and Underground Railroad historic sites on a 550-mile route that would share those authentic stories of Harriet Tubman and freedom seekers in New York. A byway and things like all-American roads or even national byways can foster community pride, enhance residents' quality of life, preserve historic and natural assets, and inspire visitors to be agents of change, just as were abolitionists and freedom seekers themselves. A New York State process of designating a byway is a community-initiated and driven project. So that is the reason that we are starting our process with the stories that are along this route. And then we continue our process by reaching out to local municipalities for their blessing, as it were, in continuing with our process, which is building a corridor management plan. So that's a strategic document that we then show to New York State's DOT, who would grant our eligibility to be a byway, and then hopefully we get voted on by some body of legislature or of the New York State Legislature. And that's a process that involves state senators and state assembly people. So the byway designation process, as I was saying earlier, it starts with just interest in scenic byway designation. We get our eligibility determined, and then we also have formed a about 30 active member steering committee that is comprised of members from communities and institutions from across the 22 New York State counties that our proposed byway route would go through. So we continue this theme of community and regional support. So in 2023, the Underground Railroad Consortium of New York State received grant funding from New York State Economic Development Agency as part of a post-COVID tourism marketing grant. So our pitch to receive that grant funding was to establish a scenic byway in New York State that had the ability to connect with other existing scenic byways that are in Maryland, Delaware, and parts of Pennsylvania that honor Harriet Tubman's legacy. So if this were designated in New York State, we would not be alone. We would have other states that we are actively working with to promote this history. And that's a lot of mileage and visibility, and then partnership ability. And it helps the fact that our byway doesn't just stop in New York State. There's more for people to explore, and also bigger audiences to participate in this. So across 2023 and now into 24 and 25, we developed parts of our corridor management plan and the infrastructure and organizational capacity to continue this process. And we have been reaching out, as I said before, across all of the municipalities that are included. So here's a snapshot of what the overall Harriet Tubman Byway would look like from New York City down here, going up the Hudson Valley to Albany and across central New York into the Finger Lakes, notably going through Auburn, New York, which was the site of Harriet Tubman's home after her Civil War service. And then it also includes Niagara Falls, which was the site of her first self-emancipation into Canada. So there's international implications for collaboration as far as tourism, and then history, and even international goodwill building as a result of this program.
One thing I just want to jump in here is that while the Harriet Tubman is the name that people know, but this really is about building this path, understanding the pathway of freedom that people from the South took coming north, but also that enslaved people who lived right here in this area took as they moved north. And we know that this area of New York City and the Hudson Valley was a site of quite a bit of enslavement and quite a bit of self-emancipation. So we want to make sure that people understand that we're not just talking about Harriet, but that she's a name that resonates, that is symbolic of something that's much bigger than she. But also that this byway, which starts in her birthplace in Maryland, is part of a continuous story.
Excuse me if I might,
Absolutely.
just a curiosity. This resolution comes from us, talks about Board 8, but how extended are you on that map of other communities' involvement in?
Well, I can talk about Dutchess County, for example. Every county we're working on every county. And some counties, we've got municipalities and counties, some we're still running to get. But in Dutchess County, for example, we have the town of Poughkeepsie. Supposedly by tomorrow, we have the town of Poughkeepsie. By tomorrow, we should have the city of Poughkeepsie. We have the town of Hyde Park. We have the town of Rhinebeck. We have the town of Wappingers. We have the town of Fishkill. So there's a few more ones that still have to come on board, but we've been working on this process across the state in every single county that's going on. You may have a summary of how many more we have, but we've done quite a few.
Absolutely. There are about
And Manhattan too, we have
we have a couple of other community boards in Manhattan. So I can actually zoom right over to the local, area that this route looks like, because I don't believe that's in the slides, so I'm gonna, drag this window over into my shared screen. And we can, yes,
Is part of the scenic byway water,
that's
Or it
actually,
Goes
that's,
along
the
water.
bank of the. Hudson?
Yeah.
yes.
So, I mean, one thing that we've been thinking about, again, looking at this as a developmental thing, is that frankly, any town or that has any kind of a waterfront is a site of, on the Underground Railroad, so to speak, because people, it was much faster to get on a boat and go up to Albany than it was to walk. And here's something else you might not know, is that many of the captains of boats were either free or enslaved black people, many who had a natural interest in sheltering those who were seeking freedom. We know that there were stops along in Yonkers and, Nyack, in, Peekskill, in Poughkeepsie. So again, this is develop, the opportunity to develop those sites, along the river,
Yes.
but others as well.
Yeah, so, this purple line represents the route as it exists in our area within New York City and leading into, mainland New York State via Yonkers and other towns, and parts of Westchester County. But, the line itself, it's designed as a driving route, but as part of our corridor management plan, we do incorporate other alternative methods of transportation. So if people wanted to explore this historic route via train, plane, bus, bicycle, boat, we encourage that, and we would aim to have some documentation that allowed for that kind of exploration. Also, what's worth it to know is that, these red shaded municipalities represent the areas that we're seeking resolutions from, but anything within 4 miles, in this case, west or east, is eligible for us to include the history of and historic sites and recreation locations in that strategic document that we give to the, to NY DOT, saying, here's where we're going to engage with stewardship of the route. So we want people who, are local or traveling into the state to experience this to go off route a little bit and see what there is to do and eat and drink and explore, as they travel the
And
route and buy. So it's not only a historic, or a way to promote the history, but it's also an economic development vehicle for the areas. I mean, there's a lot of activity in New York City, of course, but there are certain neighborhoods and places that could use a little more business. And it's the same with places in the rest of New York State. There are certainly small towns, and that's why a scenic route is scenic. We only use state roads, we don't go on highways, because we want people to travel off of the beaten path. And that includes parts of 9A over here. So for New York City, it starts at Manhattan Community Board 4 at the Lincoln Tunnel, goes up the Henry Hudson Parkway, into Community Board 7, 9, and 12. So far, we've received resolutions of support from Community Boards 4, Manhattan Community Boards 4 and 7, and we're anticipating resolutions from 12, 4 and 9, and we're anticipating from 7 and 12. And hopefully, what's great about presenting here today is that this is the only community district that is needed in the Bronx, but we would still be able to encourage people to travel to any of these other community districts that are shaded in orange, which means their history and sites will be included in our corridor management plan. So this
Because
is
of the 4 mile.
because of a 4 mile
Radius.
radius. So we're telling people to explore the history of as you can see, the entire Bronx. Which is very exciting for us as the Underground Railroad Consortium to connect with more historians and historic sites that have this history. Any other questions about the route or things of that nature?
I don't wanna cut you short, but, what I'm trying to, I just went to Albany by the thruway, so I would have missed all of this.
Yes,
The question in my mind is, and I like one of the, therefore be resolved, that we should not support, cannot support, should never support billboards along the way.
Mhm.
So my question is, how do pedestrians, walkers, bicyclists, boaters know that this is the scenic route? And what do they pick up along the way so that they are better educated on the subject matter?
Mhm.
That's a great question.
I think signage is one of them.
New York
And
State DOT provides the signage once this passes.
Yes, there's signage, so for example, if you're going up Henry Hudson, you see Wave Hill. This is where you get off to go to Wave Hill. There'll be those kinds of things, and again, we're looking long-term developmental stuff. Clearly, the Van Cortlandt House would have information and maps that would show you those things. We have the Kingsbridge Historical Society, could that become an interpretation center so that more people are going there? Those are the Bronx Historical Society is another place. So once this gets passed, you gotta think a 10-year plan, really. How do we start publicizing and building this up? What kinds of programs do we have? Do we have a Harriet Tubman Day in Wave Hill, for example, or in Van Cortlandt Park? Those kinds of activities, I think, will allow us to do that, but the signage will come from DOT.
But you're envisioning, I'll say, bronze little plaques.
Yeah.
Saying, as I see when I drive up Route 32 in New York, I see plaques along the way. That is an historic district.
Yes,
Washington did more than sleep there.
that's
Right,
right. That's it.
exactly.
Right.
So New York State DOT will assist us in working with their regional DOT offices to at least put highway style signage denoting the byway. But then we will include within our corridor management plan, also engaging with town historians, with sign making, not-for-profits like the William Pomeroy Foundation. They give funding to put those bronze style historic signs in various places. So we would like to see more of those as well. And to answer your first question about how this might, or this information might get to people who aren't just driving, that's also included in our corridor management plan, where we talk about how we do reach other folks who are doing non-traditional or non-driving transportation. So we can work with a New York State Park site or a bike comfort area along the Empire State Trail to maybe include some information about how those travelers can interact with our route as well.
And I know from having visited Maryland and seen folks on the trail, there are people who do these walking tours on the trail. And there will be places of looking at, well, we've got the driving piece, but then where do you walk to parallel that, right? And they stop at various museums. We've already had a group come up from Maryland, a bike tour. We had the Harriet Tubman bike tour that basically took this or something similar to this trail. And I got a picture of them when they stopped on the walkway over the Hudson. So those are things that have to be developed, but there are folks interested in doing that.
And just jumping right off of that point, we have some economic figures from other notable scenic byways. For example, Maryland's Harriet Tubman Byway contributed to the visibility of 251,000 new visitors to that byway, a contribution of 23 million in sales annually. Other similarly sized byways like the Natchez Trace Parkway in Mississippi, Tennessee, and Alabama, that covers 444 miles and saw an increase of or just a figure of 18.4 billion of direct spending and the support of 318,000 jobs nationally. There's also another example of a byway, the Journey Through Hallowed Ground National Scenic Byway. It's a 15-county byway region of Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia. Also generates in the billions for inbound activity. So that's something that we hope to see, but the process of writing a corridor management plan ensures that that kind of growth is done sustainably and with community based organizations in mind. So that's why we're coming to the table and saying, we want your support so that we can come back to you with our corridor management plan that you are supporting, but also getting your input as we take this document to the New York State DOT. But we can't even give DOT a document that says we're gonna do something in the Bronx without you first saying that you agree to our participation with you.
So you gave us this rather extensive resolution,
Yes,
which we could approve in part of, all or part of. And, you wanna talk through the resolution?
yeah, absolutely.
By the way,
You
here's
have
the
copies
bike.
on the table.
With that picture of the bike people who came up from Maryland and all the way through here, so.
So the,
Is it necessary for your purposes that everything that's in here be part of the resolution, or is it important just that the sense of it, that we approve it and that we approve its involvement of our community and that kind of thing?
the most important aspects, I mean, it's all important because the majority of the resolution talks about who we are, what we are, and
Right.
what we've done to get up to this point. But the.
It's the now therefore, like
Yeah,
in most resolutions,
Absolutely.
right? Got
But
it.
the crucial part of the resolution is that Bronx Community Board 8 will support the designation of the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Scenic Byway in New York, which includes programs for stewardship and enhancement of the scenic byway, and that Community Board 8 confirms that they will not approve any requests for new off-premise outdoor advertising, which means billboards, means commercial billboards. Any existing commercial billboards that are along
It
Route
may be
9.
different in other community, in other municipalities in the state of New York, but I don't. Marty would be
power
a
that we-
resident expert,
We don't
but I
have-
don't think we
Power
have.
that we give
Have
away
any
that we don't have.
unit of control over
Yeah.
highways and byways that way.
But no, but actually nine, there are no billboards on the Henry Hudson, which is what's gonna.
Because it's a
go-
parkway.
Yeah,
Right.
there's no billboards, so
Yeah.
you have to say that because the Department of Transportation wants you to say that, but it's actually a no-brainer because
If
you don't
try
have
to
it
put up a
anyway.
billboard on 9A, Robert Moses's ghost comes back.
Right, oh God, and who wants that?
No one
No,
wants that.
no, right.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a fair question because we have had other municipalities, about 60 to 70 other New York State municipalities out of the 170 that we're asking have issued resolutions already. And some of them say, we have banners up over the holidays saying, welcome to our downtown
It's
district.
not our.
Those aren't off-premise advertising.
No, they're not.
People ask if sandwich boards outside advertising lunch specials will be taken down. Nothing to do with the off-premise advertising that we're talking about. So those are the asks of our resolution. So, and those are necessary as per DOT.
They are for DOT, that's very important, but some different municipalities, you could even give them some examples, like I think Niagara Falls changed it slightly with some, whatever. So it's not like it's impossible to have a little different wording, but those
We can't give
pieces
away
of-
something we don't have,
right?
Yeah.
Right,
so that's no problem.
right.
Could I ask a question,
Yes.
fundamental actually? In 2021, the board, the Community Board 8 passed a resolution, supporting, at that time, I think he was a city council person, Rodriguez is his last name.
Adonis, first. name.
Yes, and, that was set up a task force. Also for the underground, and you gave me
Yeah,
the
we-
information.
We passed it, yes.
Yeah, so, is your existence after that? Are you connected in some way with that? Or, I'm a little confused because we did do that in my committee,
Uh-huh,
the education committee.
oh.
And now this bypass,
Is that it?
It
byway
is,
is
but it doesn't
coming.
have any vote on it or date. so
And,
it's a little bit questionable.
it seems like the task force would do something like that also. So
Well,
I'm
this sounds
wondering
great. We
what
should-
is going on.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, as a historian, you're gonna have to do
Yeah,
Yeah,
some historical
exactly.
research, because that has no vote on it, it has no date,
Yeah,
so.
and this is
Well, I
also,
have
this
that
is,
information,
this is specific to New York City. So
Yeah.
something like the byway,
but
which
you
is.
mentioned New York City.
Because our statewide route includes a road that goes through. So if this was a separate initiative,
Maybe.
or if it became a separate initiative, it is something that we would support and hope to drive traffic to. Say it consists of a different road, that goes through parts of Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx. They're
So
just-
they have existed,
I have not heard of this
Road
I know,
initiative.
I know.
It's not-
designation?
It's not a part of our, process.
There's I don't know about the task force, but there are a number, if you look on, these story maps, there are a number of really terrific story maps about the history of slavery and the Underground Railroad in New York City that have been put online. This may have something to do with this task force, we would try to find out. But one of the things that we could also do is actually find out and try to hook up, maps with the maps that already exist.
It would seem that
It
way.
would be wonderful to be able to do that. I'm very excited about maps, by the way.
Yeah, I mean,
too.
it's possible, so that if it's not too much trouble, you can find the date of the resolution, that would be.
Yeah, but he is no longer a council member.
No, wait, but what's
He's
interesting
not
is
commissioner.
he's the commissioner of transportation
Yeah.
in New York City now.
Yeah, this
He
would.
went from being
exactly.
the.
that's New York City DOT.
So
Yeah.
just- Yes, yes,
And
yes.
We
Just
hope,
interesting.
we aim to work with New York City DOT as well. Primarily, our designation process comes
Sure,
from state DOT.
No, just more of a
No,
footnote.
that's,
But the
that's
importance
fantastic.
here
great.
is historically, we're already committed to this concept.
It's wonderful. It's absolutely
Yeah,
wonderful.
That's what I'm
great.
saying.
Yeah,
I
No,
totally
it's
forgot about it, you're right.
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yes.
So the next part of this presentation, and I'll zoom along, because we've been getting great questions and want you to have time to continue asking more. This just is.
And having a meeting.
Exactly, and having the rest of your meeting. This just goes through some of the components, we call them, of our corridor management plan, which is that strategic document. We talk about stewardship of resources, funding, technical assistance, training, visitor and community engagement, conservation, preservation. These are all aspects that we are researching. We're working with cultural heritage consultants and putting together this comprehensive document that takes all of these things into consideration. There are other byways in New York State that were maybe at the start championed by local organizations, and they all have different degrees of success because of the locals on the ground that are continuing to do the work for them. So it's our aim to have a strong byway organization that is supporting all of these aspects of stewardship. We consider traffic and safety. We're consulting directly with New York DOT to put together this plan. Marketing and promotion, we have a number of what we call destination marketing organizations, that's the tourism offices of various counties across New York State. They're actively participating with us, namely Cayuga County in Auburn, Erie County, which is where Buffalo is, Albany County, Oneida County, which is where Utica is. These are all countywide tourism offices that have staff that are committed to ensuring that we continue this and work with them to promote their areas.
If I can bring this to conclusion.
Yeah.
Or to explain the final, be it therefore resolved, what our relationship, what our continuing relationship with you is intended to be based
Absolutely.
on this resolution.
Absolutely. If you pass this resolution, we are obligated and we're thrilled to have the opportunity to bring our progress and our developments back to you. Firstly, in the form of, when we finish our corridor management plan or draft, we are going to have public sessions where we get feedback from local organizations and municipalities of, what we talk about in the plan. And we would hope that the municipalities that resolve to support this can work with each other to better promote the byway.
So concretely, what would be great would be, once this goes to Albany, once we know that, because everything has to get passed by the legislature, is we should have another meeting. That's sponsored by the community board and some other organizations, or perhaps we wanna have it at the Van Cortlandt House, or maybe we wanna have it at the Kingsbridge Society to talk about this, to encourage people to come and to start doing some work, to start putting together a local map. here's some really interesting stuff. This community board is the site of really incredible history that you don't know about. Don't you wanna know? Indeed, and we could do that. And I live here, I love it. I know a lot of other people who really love it and have said they would like to be involved. So first, we've gotta get this going, then we can start doing the local work that makes it the difference between a theory and a practice. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I would leave it to Julie. We happen to be the committee of convenience
Mhm.
at the moment.
Yes,
I'm not sure whether the committee that should further pursue this, maybe it's your committee, but I leave that to Julie after we decide what we're gonna do, since we're the point person at the moment. So we let you know
yes.
who better to reach.
Well, we should vote in support of the resolution as a committee. in
Well,
order to-
that's obvious, the question.
Right.
The
When?
first point is there a resolution on tomorrow night's agenda? And the answer will come from us if we support this resolution or not. At the moment, I don't see why we wouldn't,
Right.
unless there's somebody else in the room I
No, I'm
haven't
just
spoken
trying to
with,
advance the ball here.
Yeah.
as I was trying to do.
And why does it have to be done by tomorrow night? I mean, I don't understand that.
So that part of it is, we are seeking the resolutions, the municipal resolutions across the state before our resolution deadline of June 15th.
I see.
So that we can start to get our own ball rolling with our heritage consultants who are drafting the plan. In order for them to draft the plan concretely, they have to know what parts of the state we got approval from, so that they can start bringing in the maps and the research.
And Sylvia, let me
Yes.
give you my card, because I'd love to talk to you more about all this.
Okay.
Excellent.
So, that having been said, is there a motion? Well, let's look at the resolution first. Is there any comment on the resolution? My two issue about the resolution have been resolved. We're not going to approve any billboards. And thank you. And, I understand what the last be it resolved means,
I move we approve the resolution
as written.
as written.
You agree?
Yeah.
Okay, so by unanimous vote.
Great.
And that may have cut out another half hour of your presentation.
Yeah,
Terrific,
fine.
that's great.
That's fine by us.
Yes, and Sylvia, anytime you want to call, I'd really love to sit down and talk with you.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Will that
Thank
mean
you.
that we're going to have another meeting with these lovely people
In the future,
In the future,
in the
but it
future?
could be.
and Julie will decide
Past the
which,
June 15th.
which committee.
That's the
Right.
main-
Yeah.
But to let you know, we have a couple of upcoming meetings, public meetings, where we bring a draft of our corridor management plan that we're planning on bringing to somewhere in New York City to be determined, and somewhere in
And we'll
Westchester
let you
County
know.
towards the end of May, beginning of June.
Okay.
Presumably you got in touch with our board office,
Yes.
so you know the way.
Thank you so much for giving us the chance and
Appreciate it.
for putting up with all that.
Thank you. Oh, just out of curiosity, does self-emancipation mean escape?
Yes,
Thank you.
yes,
The
but-
words change.
well, they do, and they're so interesting, and that's a whole thing
That's a
in and of
history
itself.
thing.
That's a history, and
Yeah.
that's correct. It's historiography.
Right. Exactly.
If I can get it. One of the things that we say is that what sparked the abolition movement was people were running away and people said, we gotta help these people.
Thank you, everyone, for your time, and everyone online. Appreciate it, and feel free to reach out to us. My email is listed here. Happy to field any further questions.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks
for
everyone for
your
coming.
presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Give an
Thank you,
extra
Chairperson
card
Reyes.
that we can- Give an extra bit of card that we can pass on to.
You know, I gave
Okay,
you my
that's
last
fine,
one.
that's
Take a
fine.
picture.
Right.
That's why we have,
Make
that's
a
why
copy.
God invented phone. Great, take pictures.
Right.
Thanks,
All
everyone.
right, thank you.
God didn't do that.
I'll wait for you.
Thank you.
Minutes and did that. My report and nothing really, other than, Following last month's meeting, Steve wrote a letter to Ramdot. Discussing some of our concerns about the so-called comeback kid award. That reported Wednesday night at the executive committee. I'm not terribly happy with his report. Took the position of. He took the position as soon as he leaves before he's doing it. You took the position that they don't want to, they don't want to constrain future committees by establishing rules. I found that a little strange. I challenged it, but I felt that challenging it head on 1-to-1 in that venue wasn't appropriate. But I think we should follow up. The whole idea is to establish credentials. What's the purpose of your reward? Now and forever. Obviously, others can change it if there's a reason to change it. But if you don't know what it's being given for, then why give it?
Right, I mean, it's not the Constitution, it's not, I mean, it's just a committee resolution setting criteria, but it's a way for people, A, not to have to invent the wheel every year, and B, so that there is a meaning attached to the award,
Well,
if
we
it's
don't know who the
necessary.
kid committee will be then, why should we constrain them? They
Well,
can do
that's-
what they want. To me, that's nonsense.
Right.
But I don't want to say that publicly.
Well, you were
Which I just did.
I'm just curious, what about a somewhat separate issue, but related, of having, how many Yankees awards? I don't think I said it in my email, but there are a certain number of Yankees citizenship service awards, at least 5. And at the same time, we're giving
I think
out,
there was 7. No, for some reason, that number popped in my mind.
at the same time, we're giving out, oh, here it is, 5. 5 Yankee awards with $750 stipends, for, community service where there are specific requirements, 50 hours, work as a tutor, mentor, and only for high school seniors who reside or perform community service in Bronx Community Board 8, District 8. All fine. And then there's the comeback, which has some hazy language about overcoming challenges and demonstrated improvement over a period of time. And I'm not saying that those 2 things are the same, but it was my concern that we're essentially giving out 6 awards a year out of 1 committee. And maybe as long as the Yankees are doing this, we can just give out that award and that's enough.
Julie, I asked you to unmute. Can you? Try again.
Okay,
Participants.
now I did it. I found it. Thanks. Okay, I was just gonna say that the youth committee, they did come out with a resolution, pretty much changing some of the criterias and opening more up for the youth committee for the Comeback Kid Awards, where before it was restrictive that they had to be from certain centers. Now it's open to all the youth between certain ages. And the reasoning that they decided to keep the Yankees award as well as ours is just because of that fact. The Yankees awards, we're just assisting them. It's not really coming from the community board, whereas a Comeback Kid Award is coming from the community board.
I'm not arguing, but the Yankees do ask us to name the people, correct? The recipients?
They ask us to do the outreach for them since they go to every community board. They've
Right.
done that for years with the community board. We were fortunate in the past to have Roscoe from, I forget his last name, one of the Tuskegee Airmen used to come to the board meetings and give out the awards years ago
Right.
on behalf of the Yankees.
Yeah, but the fact is, the Yankee Award has specific criteria.
Yes,
Which the committee can interpret as they will, as they select the awardees. The question is, how does the Comeback Kid Award differ than that significantly that we have to keep it? And since they don't wanna put down why the award is different, that raises its problem unto itself,
Yeah,
which will not be resolved this year.
right, I understand. The Yankees do put down the
Yeah, there are
criteria. They don't
different
ask
criteria.
us for the, okay.
Community service in the board
Yeah, yeah.
area.
Senior, right.
The comeback kid, touched on, children who were, kind of,
Wayward and came back.
right,
Yeah, well, that was never a
And-
real
and-
thing.
yes, it was.
It never happened.
Originally, it was.
It came from one committee chair.
Well,
And
I
it
can't
ended up,
remember his
I know
name,
exactly what
but
it
the
was.
one that brought it to our attention, at that time, he was the
right, he was
youth
very
chair.
active youth committee chair.
And, the people, the children that came and got the award, you could tell were, indicative
Oh,
of
okay.
that type of a
My
person.
impression was that they were simply,
So, I think that it was a well, placed award, and I would hate to see it not be there.
And it
Yeah,
also
so-
has a younger audience as well. It's all encompassing and it's coming from the board. The Yankees could stop at any day, at least we will continue ours.
The name you're thinking of is in your letter, Lamont Parker.
no,
Oh, okay. Moving forward for the moment anyway, I sent a letter to Sergio. I have not received a response from him. The only response I received was that he canceled the meeting
Yeah,
that was to follow up
I saw
a day
that.
or so later. So either he avoided this, but he's not responded, which is not strange. Okay, now we discussed, the railroad, we agreed to the railroad. What is this? Now, next item is status of Albany legislation between my illness and, Steve having a day job. We didn't do very much on that, but we do know that the legislative session is quickly coming to a close. So we better do some homework, at least before they close. Next,
when did they go out of session?
I heard a month and a half, so maybe it's
Okay.
in the end of June, I guess. I think, did they reference it? They wanna get their resolution into the legislature before they close for the session?
Oh, if that was the,
Which is
the
why they're
idea, then it
pushing.
was June 15th, yeah.
Now the bylaws question, that Steve was going to work on and did. Now Steve sent me something today. I didn't have a chance to look at it. Is there a reason you want me to open that up instead of this?
Well, it's they're just so that, I guess everybody on the call knows what this is. I put out to Marty and Julie a week or two ago, just, an idea for a potential amendment of section 3 of article 5 of the bylaws to clear up what, I agree, I certainly never noticed it, was a conflict between the first sentence of the bylaws section, which talked about having, someone take over fill a vacancy, for the remainder of a term.
Yes,
And then the second provision saying, and you have to hold an election 2 months after the vacancy becomes apparent.
yes, it was for a short period of time, I think 2 meetings or
But
something
the
like
first
that.
sentence seemed more global, like it said that you serve out the remainder of the term, so that's inconsistent with holding an election in 2 months. If the vacancy is in December, you've got more than 2 months in the remainder of the term. So, anyway, Julie worked through it in her own way. Given the most recent several vacancies, I think 3. And it was certainly I think ingenious approach to it. But nevertheless, there was a conflict in this, in our bylaws. So I made some suggestions, and then after getting Julie's feedback, and being forced, as usual, to actually write something down, you see things differently. I redid the changes, and that's what I circulated today. But I only sent it to Marty in case you wanted to put it up on the screen.
Well,
But,
I didn't have enough time, I didn't see it until,
no, of
I was
course, I
already
sent
here.
it before I got on the train at 6:15. But the bottom line, and what I'm not proud of, is that, it, kind of doubles the length of this section of the bylaws. And it was one of those things that where you start thinking about something. And one problem I think that we had not been raised before, but and maybe I wasn't the only person to notice this, but I noticed it maybe independently, is that there will be situations in which, for whatever reason, someone can't step in and serve, even on an interim basis. And then the question is, and do you want any of the officers to step in for a board chair for a period as long as, multiple months, not just a month or two? So the way that I drafted the most recent amendment, which I could certainly hand you a copy of, was that, number one, the only board officer who would be susceptible of being replaced for the remainder of the term would be the board chair, who are being replaced by the vice chair of the board, of the whole board. And that would be the only interim replacement. And if the board vice chair couldn't serve, for whatever reason, then there would be an election within 2 months for a new board chair. Furthermore, if the board vice chair couldn't even serve for the 2 months
Mhm.
interim, then the secretary, to have an order of succession, would serve for those 2 months. And if the secretary couldn't, then it's the treasurer. And after that, your bet is as good as mine.
In theory, I think it makes sense. However, in personalities or in capability, it might not make sense. Because you don't know if, the vice chair probably is of the same thinking as the chair, but as far as the secretary and the treasurer, they're different animals.
Well, that's why my proposal is to only have the secretary and the treasurer stand in for a maximum of those 2 months.
Mhm,
Someone's got to be in that role.
right,
And if the vice chair has already resigned for whatever reason, or medical issues make it impossible, then the goal is to have someone signing whatever has to be signed by the board chair. So my solution was,
well, there's very little that, yeah, I mean,
right, but 2 months is a long time.
document, yeah.
2 months is a long time.
I don't know, I was always under the impression that the bylaws have proved to be extremely good all these years. And it's like a constitution. And to change it at this point, I don't know,
It's interesting perspective, because I never realized there was that contradiction. And when Julie called and said, I have this problem, how should I handle it? I was of the mind that we have an election. We had a board member who was going crazy over 2 months have gone by, I haven't announced. So he's no longer on the board. But Julie pointed to the sentence before that. And so the whole conversation here is to eliminate that contradiction. If it requires, which is Steve's direction, is to expand the verbiage to cover more situations, I think you're right. It is, the bylaws have served us well up to this point. But I think we need to eliminate the thought that there's a contradiction in there.
well, I had a situation and I didn't know how to handle it and I let it go. The general meeting that we had in the Riverdale Y, David had given up his position. And Julie put, Joy in as budget chair, even though she's treasurer. For, I guess, a short period of time. I'm not sure what she was thinking. But I understand that there is something written, and I couldn't find it, but I was told that it is there. That you cannot have a treasurer be a budget chair at the same time.
Officer can't be a chair of a committee.
Correct.
So I don't know why that was voted on, because it doesn't sound right. Um, what I'm trying to say is, we have rules, but sometimes they're not followed. And for changing that now, when the situation hasn't really come up, that is a problem.
It did just come up, that's the whole point. It just came up in the spring. At
What?
the meeting
That-
at the Y,
That the chair left,
that you had 3 vacancies.
the
This is
chair was
about committee
vacant.
chairs, this is about.
Julie's raised her hand, let's talk. Julie,
No, not the board chair, no.
Okay.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the committee.
Everything.
Oh.
This covers
Julie, go ahead.
Okay, wait, can you hear me? Oh,
Yes.
God. You can hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, just a few clarifications and corrections. Marty, is it possible that you could put up section 3, the section that we're talking about, where it starts at upon the death, resignation, termination,
uh.
bylaws?
is it close?
What I sent you has section 3 unchanged. This one,
Yes,
all on one.
then put that,
Places
put that up.
Find it here. Let's see, how do I get
well, I
online?
have a copy. I don't know if you guys have a copy, but
You guys
I
know
brought a
how I get
Are you
online?
looking about, at the internet?
Yeah,
Oh, you're not looking for my piece of paper?
I am, on the internet, what you just sent me.
Okay,
Oh, no,
let me
she-
email.
You said the original's there.
that wasn't sent to me, right?
No, I just sent it to Marty in case he wanted.
So does anyone see how I get on the internet? At the internet?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so hang a little tight, till I figure this out. Don't go away.
Julie's having a ride.
However,
Mail. Okay, log in.
I'd like to make a suggestion, and I have complete faith in you, but if, Julie, if you have the text of the existing provision, and I have it on extra copies on paper, we maybe don't have to look at it.
Okay,
all spoken for.
Yeah,
well, I would like the people on Zoom to be able to follow us too when they're reading back
You
on
are the
this.
people.
You are the only person on.
No,
Zoom.
this will be seen in the future, and I just, because there's a lot of incorrect statements that were done, so I just want to make sure people follow it. You could go on the website while you're on the computer, because it's on our, on the community board's website. You could just click on that since you're sharing.
Say no thanks. You got a pop up there, that's what I'm telling you, to say no thanks.
No, thanks, okay. Email. I just filled it in, gotta do it again?
No, you're asked for a six
Oh
digit.
crap, I hate that,
That's these 2-factor authentication.
I hate that.
I could read it by line if it's like really too hard to bring it up. Because the whole,
Copies of them. The top is the existing bylaw. That we're talking about. Not the bottom, just the top.
mhm. Oh, I have that. I have that. I have
It'd be
copies.
Article 5, Section 3.
Impressive.
Okay, we all are set, I think.
Okay, so I did contact Marty initially because to me it was a bit confusing because we did have a member who did not reapply, so therefore the budget committee chairmanship was open, and then we had 2 committee chairs. The termination, when you read the word termination, because it has 2 lines, upon the death, resignation, termination of board membership or removal, that vacancy created will be filled by the board. And that is the position that the vice chairperson shall assume the position of the chairperson of the remaining of the term. So for the budget chairperson, he had a vice chairperson, and that vice chairperson was Joy. Joy is not she's a treasurer. She is not the chairperson of a committee. So therefore, as the vice chairperson of budget, she is allowed to step up and be the budget chair.
Actually not.
Turns
Excuse
out
me?
that's probably not right.
I'm sorry?
Now, there are 2 separate issues. The issue
Right, I
of
want to
you-
deal with one at a time because there was a lot,
Yeah,
like
but the
Sylvia
issue
brought
you
up.
are referring to as succession of vice chair, the other issue is the prohibition that an officer of the board cannot be a chair of a committee.
And where is that?
A little further up in the bylaws.
Because we have Sergio who's chairing the veterans.
Take that committee. Very sure.
We have Margaret who's chairing SCREE. And in the past, we had Bob Bendel when he was vice chair. He chaired, well, he's still chairing the Hudson,
Special committee on the Hudson River Greenway.
right? So
Yeah,
where
it
is,
seems like, well, no, I think there is a provision that says you can't run for being a vice chair, if you're, at least in the ethical guidance manual, you can't be a
Right.
you can't be, and it may be in the bylaws too, Marty seems to recall it, and Sylvia seems to recall that an officer can't.
well,
be
I
a
want to
committee
see
chair.
it. I want to see it because if they're saying that, you know, something was done incorrectly, I just want to make
Yeah,
sure
well, I mean,
that it's not done in the future. I didn't see it and I just want to know where is that?
right, well, we should find it, I can't, without looking right now on a computer, I can't find it, but we should find that. It is possible, if it's only in the ethical guidance manual, and I don't know, but
That I didn't look at.
no, but I'm saying if the prohibition we're talking about is only in the EGM, it's possible that that only has to do with elected special committee chairs, and since the board chair appoints special committee chairs, like the Hudson River Greenway and Veterans and SCREE, then maybe that's an exception, Julie, but it wouldn't apply probably to budget.
No, it wouldn't.
Well, I
Well,
don't see that in writing anywhere. And if that's so, I would like to see it. Because
I know
according,
it's in the EGM.
but according to our bylaws,
That's-
when there is
Yeah,
a
I know.
vacancy, the vice chair resumes the assumes the position for
No,
the
it's in a
remainder of the
different part of
term.
the bylaws. If it were
Excuse me?
anywhere, it would be any different. If it were anywhere in the bylaws, it would not be in the paragraph we're looking at.
So that the fact that the vice chair from the budget assumed the responsibility of the chair, even though they're an officer, according to what I'm seeing in front of me, there was nothing wrong with that.
If there's we're talking about something, I don't have it in front of me. If there's another part of the bylaws that says an officer can't be a chair or something to that effect, then it wouldn't matter what the provision in section 3, article 5 says.
Right, exactly. But I heard that it was, and that who am I to change the rules at this point? I want it clarified, and I want to see where does it say that.
But there was a situation with Phil Friedman, who was the treasurer when he was there,
Right,
and the budget person left, and there was no vice chair, and then he took it over, and that was found in a document, I'm not sure which, that he could not hold both positions. So there is a history of that not being allowed.
Julie, just out of curiosity, and I know we can't have the meeting going forever, but is there, in the board office, is there a hard copy of the bylaws that you know you could direct me to, or that's too involved?
I don't know that office.
Yeah, got it.
I don't know. So Marty, that's something for you, if you could report back at the next meeting. If that
Absolutely.
was done incorrectly, and to cite where in the bylaws it states that they may not. Because then that would be something that I would address and state, because if I ever do something incorrectly, whether it's intentional or not, I like to address it. And when I did this, I went by the bylaws and I didn't see anything.
I never knew that Joy was, a vice chair of the budget committee.
You can be
This
vice
is the
chair.
first I've heard of it.
But even if,
Well,
but.
It was not, it was noted at meetings, at our executive meetings and every other meeting. It wasn't a secret. I mean, because I asked most
But-
chairs to
No,
get a.
I'm just saying, I didn't know. I'm not saying you kept it secret. I'm just saying, I didn't know.
Yeah. Okay, well, David selected her, you know. David selected her a long time ago. Now, in regards to that same section, when I first approached Marty on when I felt that there was a double standards in section 3, because it states that if there is a, excuse me. What is this? It states that upon the occurrence of vacancy in the position of a chairperson or vice chairperson, the vice chairperson shall assume. And that's with when someone, the word termination is where Steve and I look at it differently. And I look at it the same way, I guess, like Irvin Latimer took it. There are two parts to this. How do you fill a vacancy? And a termination is when someone in a negative manner leaves the board. That's how I read it. And if there's a vacancy that's open in the chairmanship position, then you shall hold an election, which we had to do with, what was it? Was it traffic and transportation? One of the committees where the vice chairperson was already a chair of a committee.
Traffic and transportation.
Right, so then we had to,
WL.
then we
So
had to,
Julie.
Yeah.
Julie, you're saying that you think that there isn't a conflict because they relate to two different things?
right, because then I went back to it after I spoke with Marty, and I even emailed and I said, now I see it. Because Irving Latimer wrote this up, and I kept looking at it and thinking, okay, he definitely knew what he was doing. And it's the word termination, because it's upon the death, resignation, termination of board membership, or removal of any officer or elected committee chairperson, the vacancy created shall be filled by the board.
But my view is that that covers every possible disappearance of a board member from a position. There's nothing left after you read the first 6 words.
Sure there is, because if someone doesn't renew their membership, or like.
That's resignation. That's
No, it
resignation.
isn't. That's not resignation. If
Well,
he
we
doesn't
disagree.
renew it, he fulfilled his term and he just didn't renew it. He did not resign.
Well, if for whatever
Rosemary
reason
resigned. Rosemary
Well,
resigned. That's
termination. Okay, I get that. I get your point. I take your point. But termination of board membership has to mean not being reappointed or not reapplying. How
No,
can
it
not
doesn't have to mean
cover
that. It does not have to mean that, because if a scholar like Irvin Latimer wrote this up, and I'm thinking, I went back to it and I said, there has to be something here. And then it made sense. Upon the occurrence of a vacancy.
Reasonable
Not
minds
what-
can differ, and Irving Latimer made lots of mistakes.
No, but I'm saying notwithstanding the provisions of this section, meaning notwithstanding the termination, upon the occurrence of a vacancy in the position of the chairperson, the vice chairperson shall assume, meaning that if they didn't die, if they didn't resign, or if they weren't terminated, we terminated one person on this board. If it wasn't any of those 3 circumstances, so the example would be if someone just didn't reapply, they finished their term, which is the position of what happened with David. Then you go to the vice chair. Because you wouldn't have a
Yeah.
line saying if there's a vacancy, the board will elect, and then the next line say, then the vice chair will take it. That would be someone who didn't even just start law school. That would be someone thinking, okay, if they just don't finish their term or if they don't come back. That's not a termination and that's not a resignation nor a death. That's just the case of David. He finished his term, there was a vacancy before the term ended, so then you get the vice chairperson to assume the position.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I don't agree.
Okay, you may not agree, but just don't say that I did it incorrectly. You and I
I
are
didn't
reading
say you-
bylaws. You did in the beginning. That's
Julie-
why I said, that's why I said I had to clear this.
Julie, I didn't say you did anything incorrectly, and you can
You
listen to
did.
this recording. No, I didn't. You can listen to this recording till the cows come home. I said you came up with a solution to reading two provisions that were in conflict. And I
Mhm.
thought it was ingenious, and I
But they're
praise
not
you
in
for it.
conflict once you look at it, once you
You are-
reread,
Okay, I respectfully submit that you could not be more wrong about that.
and that's why I wanted to clear this up. You and I
Well,
look
the
at it
Law Rules and
differently.
Ethics Committee will come up with a recommendation about it.
Okay. Okay.
But it's not about you doing anything wrong. You really can't approach this that way. That's not how,
Oh.
people get along.
I get along with all of you, but when I heard incorrectly twice from you and Sylvia, I said I need to clear this up. That's why I want it visually for everyone to take a look and read it. And people will interpret it however they want.
Well, there are two different things. I thought I was praising you for coming up with a creative solution. And Sylvia was pointing out that
It had
we
been
seem to think
history.
there's another provision that says an officer can't be a standing committee chair. But we
Right.
haven't found it because technologically, we don't have the bylaws in front of us. But we will
Yeah.
look, and it may be that it's just in the EGM for an elected office.
And if I did it incorrectly, if it's in there, I definitely want to know.
That's what we're here for.
Mhm.
I think Marty's been quiet because he's been trying to read the bylaws on his phone.
That's what I'm doing. And my fear is that you are right. It's part of the ethical guidance manual, not part of the bylaws.
Well, I promise to take a look at the bylaws. I think the whole committee, as presently constituted, should take a look at the bylaws on that subject. And then I will send what I sent just to Marty at the last minute. I'll send that to the other members of the LRE, and I'll copy you, Julie, with my latest recommendation, where the underlining is new wording and the crossing out is, although I'm not seeing much crossing out, so I'm not quite sure how this works. I may have to redo this because I'm not seeing a lot of crossing out. But it's very hard to talk about without the document in front of you.
Yeah, I understand.
Marty, disregard what I sent you because none of the strikeouts came out.
And I can't get ethical guidance manual on this.
If there's a big binder next to where Artie sits and it may say committee chairs, because they did a big binder for all the chairs, there should be an office copy. The bylaws will be in there. Right behind where Artie sits.
I don't think there's anything here.
No, Julie is saying outside the
Outside.
office, but I don't know. I mean, if people really want to do it, I can stick around. We can go through it, but. Where does Artie sit?
As soon as you walk in, the first desk as you walk in, it would be on one of the shelves.
You found it.
Well, I don't know the right thing, but.
I can't find it in the ethical guidance manual either.
Got both right here. I can't say this is the most recent version of the ethical guidance manual, but I know it's in section 5.
Well, I have part 5,
Okay,
community board administration, nominating committee,
right, that's it.
officers. And a member of the nominating committee may not be nominated by the committee for a position of officer.
Okay, the copy I'm looking at was from 2015. It's been amended 6 times. So this is out of date, what I'm looking at. I'm pretty sure the current version says you can't run for 2 things.
He definitely can't run for 2 things.
That's what I think I remembered.
You can't run for 2 things and you may not be the committee chair of 2 committees. You can only be the committee chair of 1 committee.
No, but I thought it covered officer. And, you know, you couldn't be both an officer.
Well, it would be the
and
same thing with, no, an officer is in a committee. The officer is an executive committee. They're not the chair of the committee. I'm the chair of that committee. Otherwise, we wouldn't have Bob Bender and Margaret in the past as chairs of committees.
My suggestion is let's table this discussion and pick it up when we've had a chance to review and all of us have in hand copies of the relevant sections.
Yeah, I agree. Just for my own future, looking at this stuff. The provision in the bylaws that says that a committee, you can't be a chair of 2 committees. Where is that? A different part of the bylaws. It's not in,
I didn't pick it up as I was reading.
but I know Julie knows that because she's the one who pointed it out.
Well, it's almost 9 o'clock. I have one more issue to raise. I just want to report to you a decision I made, which I hope doesn't get trashed at this moment. But I was asked whether or not it is prohibited in any way, as long as you're holding the bylaws, for there to be more than 1 vice chair of a committee. And my answer was no. The particular question was raised, more importantly, because with term limits coming to a disastrous end within 2 years, to be sure, training people to be in positions to take over chairperson positions would be greatly enhanced if newcomers could become additional vice chair during the course of that time. And I thought it was a good idea. So I said yes. Are there any dissenting opinion on that?
Wait, I'm sorry, Marty, what was the last sentence?
The issue is with term limits about to raise their ugly head within 2 years. If not sooner, 2 years, that setting up a situation where a present chair believes that the current vice chair will not survive term limits, it should be the opportunity for younger members or younger members, earlier members, excuse me, neophyte members, to begin to take somewhat roles by virtue of being a second vice chair of a committee, so that they can learn the ropes before disaster hits.
Well, my only comment would be that I don't really think it has, that may be a good reason why it's good that that's the answer. That you can have two vice chairs, but I think if the bylaws don't prohibit it and there's nothing else that prohibits it. I mean, the only thing I happen to have arrived at that place in the bylaws where it says each committee chairperson shall select a vice chairperson who shall be an appointed member of the board. And where there's a vacancy or in a committee chair, or when the chairperson or vice chairperson, if any, of a committee or is unavailable to conduct a meeting or hearing, the chairperson of the board in his or her discretion may appoint any appointed member of such committee or any member of the board's executive committee to conduct on an ad hoc basis a scheduled meeting or public hearing, etc. I just, that does suggest that there's only one vice chairperson,
Birth doesn't prohibit.
doesn't necessarily prohibit it.
Well, we used to have two vice chairs on the board, on the executive board, and they did away with that. And whoever's asking this, I mean, we're having elections next month, so that they should select a vice chair so that they can mentor them out. Whoever they have as their vice chair, they should get someone they want to mentor.
I can suggest this tomorrow, that people might want to suggest a vice chair, an additional vice chair. But as new members come on the board, it might be a good bullpen to begin selecting people with potential.
What was the circumstance in which you were asked the question? I mean, it's appropriate to ask you the question. I'm just saying, what's the issue?
Exactly the issue I just described. The current vice chair will age out, like the chair will be aging out. And there's a new member of the board they believe has potential, and they'd like to put that person in a.
Understood.
But
Yeah,
now everybody has to have a vice chair, which I'm guilty of not doing,
Right.
but, you can't have, I don't think you should have, committees that have two, vice chairs, and some that only have one vice chair. I mean, that's
That's
not
the chair's
really a
fault.
rule.
That's the chair's fault. If the chair doesn't appoint the vice chair, that's the chair's fault. Because it's been pressured, everyone's been pressured to have a vice chair. Now, in the case here we're talking about, to look at this committee. 3 of the members, aside from myself, 2 of the members are chairs of other committees. It doesn't prevent them from being a vice chair. I've spoken with Steve, and Steve is about to go over the cliff with me in 2 years. So in terms of long-term, that wouldn't solve a problem either. So what happens to this committee if we don't have new members? And let's say September, I have 5 new members. It might be a good idea to ask someone to serve as second vice chair with the potential of being an internship period.
Why couldn't they just be the vice chair? Why do I have to be a second? Even though you'd have to change the bylaws for
I'm
that.
not bumping Steve, but I see Steve volunteering right here.
I
Yeah.
see what you're saying. It's really for the specific circumstance, I think, where, as Marty said, you have a well-functioning vice chair. Like, are you vice chair of land use, Marty?
Occasionally, yes.
You have an integral functioning member who's vice chair of a committee, but that person is gonna be out the door either the same year or the adjacent year as the chair of the committee because of term limits. You might want to have, as Marty properly said, two guys warming up in the bullpen.
Well, Chuck has had over the years, since you raised the issue,
He had to.
what's
Because it was the committee of the
Had
whole
three.
too. Remember?
Dan on occasion, me on occasion, Rosemary on occasion, at least three vice chairs. And I never know who would be calling on at the various times
Right.
of who the vice chair is. So whatever we functioned as, we were there to be called on. And even though we're on tape right now and Chuck isn't present, I love when he cedes the meeting to me and then doesn't let me speak. So, are there any? Just know I have not received anything else from COIB. I haven't done the spreadsheet yet. And is there any new or old business that we need to discuss?
You mean new or unfinished business?
New or unfinished business?
Nothing from me, but I think, I promised to look at both the EGM and the bylaws. To see, so far, Julie, I haven't found anything in the bylaws, even though I'm looking at an ancient copy. That refers specifically to an officer serving as a chair. Meaning,
I don't think you will
Prohibited.
because
I think I think the spirit of it seems to be that shouldn't happen. I don't think it has happened in recent years, at least since I've been on the board. But
what,
I
that an
can't say that.
officer chair a
Isn't
committee?
mine with Phil? Or don't you go back to Phil?
Yes, I do, but I don't have your memory. I'm
Oh.
immortal.
An officer has been chairing a committee like for 10 years, I think. Bob Bender's been a chair of a committee as a vice chairperson. He was a vice chair of the board. That's an officer.
No, it's definitely the special committee thing that you mentioned, Julie, for sure, you're right. I don't have a recollection of an officer of the board serving as chair of a standing committee.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I've never even thought
But
of budget
it did
as a
happen.
standing committee.
Yeah, it did happen,
It is listed.
because I remember it.
Well, I will look at the bylaws, not tonight. I'll get to it
Well,
tomorrow.
maybe it's in the procedures. I mean, you know, we have too many documents. The ethical culture and, you know, I mean,
Guidance.
guidance, you know, I mean, we
Procedures, I
have
don't
too
know
many
procedures are-
documents.
Are electronic anywhere. I know there's maybe a copy in that book of the procedures. But I doubt that it's covered there. The procedures manual.
Yeah, this is the reference handbook for community members.
And would that, override the bylaws? No.
No,
No, but Rosemary
Yeah.
found the procedure guidelines in a book like that last year.
It's on the board's website. When
It
you
is?
click onto
Okay.
the board website, you just go all the way to the bottom and you look for
Okay, so I will add procedures to things I look for.
you look at CB8 reports and helpful resources. You'll see all the guides there.
We make rules and, you know, we should,
Especially
Follow
this
them.
committee.
yeah, right.
If there's no further business before the board, I wish you all rest up for tomorrow's meeting,
Right.
which I will attend. I am magic, not present.
Will you be there in person?
No. I'm lucky I made it tonight.
where is the meeting tomorrow night?
St. Stephen's, I was told.
In
St.
Marble Hill.
Stephen's.
In
St.
Marble
Stephen's
Hill?
Church in Marble Hill.
Oh, really?
We've been,
Many times. The last time I was there, I didn't see Reverend,
That's not such a big room.
what's his
no,
name?
it's not.
We had it last May,
I think he stepped
last
in.
year.
The guy who's the jazz musician as well. Yeah, I think he stepped in.
You know, Reverend Pete, not Reverend Pete. way back then, Reverend, maybe it was Reverend Pete. Who was pastor of that church. To the
Yeah.
end of his career.
He played a guitar.
Right. I didn't know
I
that.
remember him so well. I can't think of his name though.
Bill Peak. But his picture wasn't there last time.
Pretty sure he's retired.
Well. For A, they retired him. I think St. Stephen's retired him, and he worked for Edge Hill for a while. Anyhow, this
He's a
meeting
nice
is
man.
adjourned, the time is 9:05. I think we set a record.
Good night,
Hopefully it stands-
everybody.
Good night.
Good
Thanks
night.
very
Good night.
much.
And I have to get around a little bit more. Capture. Well, how do I stop recording?
Well, I guess you can always just end.
Recording